Morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I did say on one of my blog posts that if I found the software key to my screen recording software, we'd actually do a video on how to do time stacking. So the basic principle really is set yourself up with a tripod. You can define and choose what size images you're going to shoot. I'd suggest, first of all, when you're trying this, is to set your camera up to shoot small or medium quality JPEGs, because we're going to create a big layer stack of these in Photoshop. The software you need, you can just use Bridge and Photoshop or Lightroom and Photoshop. I do Lightroom Photoshop. I'll show you why in a minute. This is Manchester Town Hall. This is a series of exposures I did using an ND filter. If we just look here, I've got 0.4 of a second exposures. So I'm dragging the shutter a bit to get some movement in the clouds. Not entirely successful, as you'll see in the end image. But we're going to synchronize all these images. We're going to select them all. We're going to take them across to Photoshop. We're going to let Photoshop stack them up in a big layer for us. We're just going to shift to blend mode, and you'll see what happens. Okay, so first of all, what we need to do is clean all these up. Let's just close that. And I need to do some correction with the lens. I'm using the Nikon 20mm f2.8 on this wide-angle lens. It does have a lot of little faults, especially its mustache distortion on the horizontal, but we can, in Lightroom here, just change things around, and if I just choose Nikon there, it'll just change the image. There's a bit of distortion, vignetting, going on around the outside. Just want to bring that up as well. I'm going to go into basic and then do the thing you should, well, I always do first of all, is to hit the auto button and see what happens. Okay, the highlights are a bit blown out, so let's bring those back down again. Shadows, well, I want to bring up some shadow detail, maybe put a bit of clarity in there for mid-tone contrast, and I want to synchronize all these across the images I've chosen. I've chosen, I think, about 28 images. That will paste. Let's have a look and see. Here we go. Ooh, wrong way. And as I speak, it's applying those changes across this whole stack of images. And once it's done that, you can see there it's all lighting up. We could go across the images, but the clouds are actually moving across the sky in this kind of almost a 45 degrees diagonal. You can use this technique with water, fountains, clouds, anything where you've got some movement going on, and a tripod, of course, because you need to have this camera stationary, because it's good to have a counterpoint with something like a large structure like here. This is Manchester Town Hall. And once we've done all that, we're going to just take them across to Photoshop. You can do this in Bridge. Don't forget, you can synchronize all your images in Bridge if you're using Bridge Photoshop. Same engine that drives Bridge, drive Lightroom. But I just prefer to do this because I want to bring this back into Lightroom at the end and do a bit more jiggery pokery with the image. Let's just call up these again. And if I've got this stack of images, and you can see there I've got 28 selected. If I just scan across it, it tells me which ones I'm doing. It doesn't really matter if you just right click. Now in right clicking, we bring up this little menu, which lets us choose where we want to edit these in. And I want to edit these in Photoshop, and I want to edit them and let Photoshop open them as layers. And right down at the bottom here, if we just look down here, they'll be open as layers in Photoshop. So all the hard work's done. You don't have to open these in Photoshop, then drag them on top of each other, make a layer stack, all that kind of nonsense. If I just click this, now I warn you here, if you've got a lot of images, you may want to go and put the kettle on and come back in a short while with a nice cup of tea, a cup of coffee, because this can take some time. In fact, probably I'm going to do this now, and we'll shoot back with a bit of editing in Camtasia, and we'll come back when the stack is perfect. So here we go. Open as layers in Photoshop. Click on that. If we go across to Photoshop now, we will be greeted in a second, I hope, with the whirling blue wheel of fate. There we go. It'll start opening up these image files from Lightroom, and it'll put them as a layer stack. It's going to put them as a layer stack here in your layers, and it's telling us what's happening. It's loading layers in. It's just going to create a stack of layers down this side here. And as there are 28, I think it's probably, and you can see when the images load up, there'll be a slight shift in where the clouds are. Just keep an eye on that. It's almost like doing a time lapse, but compressing it all into one image. I want to do a lot of this in summertime. I'm going to do a lot of coastal work, so that obviously there might be a few sunsets thrown in, but also if you've seen some of my images online, fountains, always good with water this, especially if it's windy. If you've got that water whizzing about all over the place, the blend mode we're going to choose will show up all kinds of funny things happening in the image. And I think I'll just pause here for a moment myself, and we'll come back in a second when it's stacked up this layer, and I can talk you through the next part of the process. And it's all pretty straightforward. Once you've done this once or twice, you'll wonder why all your images don't look like this. Okay, it can get a bit tedious if you've got thousands of images that look like this, but this is the basic technique. How you develop it and use it yourself, entirely up to you, of course. I'm not going to tell you how to use this. This is just architecture with some zooming clouds going over the top. You can see down here, of course, I've got a bit of, because it's a 20mm, I didn't use the lens hood because I had an ND filter on the front. Unfortunately, with the protrusion of the front element on the 20mm Nikkor lens, you can whip up a bit of flare, or catch a bit of flare in it. One of the problems with that lens, I found, even if you use the very short lens hood that goes on there, it doesn't make much of a difference. So you might want to think about, if you're shooting especially with an angle of the sun coming across your lens, maybe shooting with something a slightly longer focal length lens, maybe a 35, 28-35 or a 50. In fact, a 50 would be ideal for this kind of thing. You'll be able to control any flare that's happening. But of course, once we've stacked this layer up in Photoshop, we can get rid of that in a trice. Okay. So hello. I think we've got to the end of the stacking. Yeah, and there we have a great big stack of images. If you look down the bottom, sometimes when you've opened a layer stack, it'll say background layer. There isn't a background in this. We can shift all these around if you want to. I don't suggest you do that at the moment, but at some other point in time, you might want to change the layer stack to affect the way in which the blend mode works. So, here's the highly technical bit. Pin them back, because here we go. We're going up to the top and making sure the top one is selected. Then we go down to the bottom of the stack, and the one that's above the last image, I want you to put the hold your shift key down on your keyboard, and then just click on that. And that's selected all the image files above the bottom one. And the reason we've done that is because I'm going to now, because these are all selected, rather than going through individually and having to change the blend mode of each one, we can now change the blend mode of them in a trice. Now, are you ready for this? Because here we go. I'm just going to press lighten on the blend mode. And there you go. Easy as that. Okay? So it's only affecting the lighter areas of your image. All the darker areas will be untouched completely. We see here there's a bit of blowing out going there. We're still working with a 16-bit image. We can actually just put a little brightness contrast. We can take the contrast down a bit maybe and take the brightness down. You can see there we've got a bit of a color shift as well. One of the things, it's a little handy hint this, if you're using a brightness contrast or any adjustment layer and you only want to affect the light values in your image, not the color values, the light values, just drop it into luminosity. Look at that. Okay, should we go back again? There's normal, slightly red because we've dragged down the brightness, we've taken down the contrast, the highlights there are tending to move across to the red end of the spectrum. If we just hit luminosity, we've got that detail in there. I'm just going to invert this mask, so select the mask, I'm pressing Control-I, Command-I on your Macintosh, that's just going to make it black, and I just want to paint back in using white, selecting a soft brush, 30%, maybe 20%, I hit 2 on the keyboard, 2 on the keyboard, we've got 20%, and I can just bring that detail that's back in there, because it is in there, just maybe get some of that detail. I can take this across to Lightroom and probably do some more work in there as well. We've saved all the detail. This will save as a TIFF once I've flattened the whole thing down. This will save as a TIFF back in Lightroom. And you can see here, just on this side over here, it's a bit juddery, and that is because there's a gap between my exposures. Now, you can actually emphasize this. If you take an exposure every 5 seconds, you'll have a jerky little gap between each shot. If you want something like a smooth drag of clouds across the sky, I suggest you have no gap at all between your exposures. You set your camera up to take 50 exposures, with no gap between, so it sounds like a machine gun going off. Only do that really if the clouds are moving quickly across the sky. If the clouds are moving slowly, you might just want to do this, which is dragging the shutter a bit, extending exposure time, and having a bit of a gap between the exposures. Anyway, enough of me chit-chatting. Let's just get rid of that. So we've seen our image. I'm going to do Shift Control E, which really is just going to flatten all that down. So now we've just got a single file. I'm going to go to File and Save. And if I just save it, what it should do, let's go back into Lightroom. What it should do, you can see on the blue bar at the bottom here, it's saving it. It saves it straight back into Lightroom. So I'm not having to save it into a folder or a file anywhere else. It goes back in with the original files. I've got those original files as a reference. At some point, yes, it should be here. It should be at the end of this. There it goes. At the end of this stack I've just had, and here it is just about to come through. Slowly loading, and there we go. Is that the one? Let's have a look at this, because I did one early just as a bit of a practice. 1208, this one, 1208. Let's have a look at this one. Much prefer this one. Okay, so you can actually do some more work on this if you want to. You can hit automatic, see what it does. I don't really like that. Let's just hold on the Alt key and reset that. So I want to take the highlights down. So you can bring it back into Lightroom and do more tickling about with your favorite toys. And that's really it. So we've gone from an image like so, and we've changed it into this by using the software, by telling Lightroom that we want to take it across into Photoshop and to stack the whole lot up as a bunch of layers. All you need for this, digital camera, tripod or something to make sure that your camera is securely fixed. So you could do the old trick I've shown a few guys, is we can get an old sock and some dry peas. So it just gives you a firm platform. Set your camera up to take a range of exposures. You can either drag the shutter using a neutral density filter, or I found out using an infrared filter recently. That's some of the stuff I've been doing. Any questions, as usual, just send me an email. I hope you like this one. Get out there and enjoy it. It's sunny, it's spring, plenty of photo opportunities out there. The clouds are scudding, the birds are tweeting, and until the next time, it's bye for now.